Our town, Hollow Creek, was practically built on ghost stories. Every corner, every shadow seemed to whisper tales of the past, tales that sent shivers down your spine. Every crumbling graveyard and gnarled oak held a secret, a whisper of something sinister. The air was thick with the weight of untold stories, and the fog that rolled in each evening seemed to carry the voices of the long departed. But none were as infamous as the tale of Whispering Pines, the neighborhood flanking our street. It was a place where the past and present seemed to collide, where the air was always a bit colder and the nights a bit darker. They said a witch cursed the land after the townsfolk drowned her in the creek centuries ago. Her spirit, they claimed, lingered, seeking vengeance on those who dared to tread on her cursed ground. The story was passed down through generations, each retelling more chilling than the last. Utter nonsense, my logical brain screamed. Ghosts and curses were the stuff of fairy tales, not reality. Yet, the stories persisted, and even the most skeptical among us couldn't completely dismiss them. Still, a shiver crawled down my spine every time my bike rattled past the rusted Whispering Pines sign. It was as if the sign itself was a gateway to another world, a world where the supernatural reigned supreme. Most of the houses stood empty, windows like vacant eyes. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of an old house settling, or the distant hoot of an owl. Except for one. Number 13, where Mr. Hemlock lived. His house was the only one that seemed alive, with lights flickering in the windows and the faint sound of classical music drifting out on the breeze. Old Man Hemlock, as everyone called him, was an enigma wrapped in a moth-eaten cardigan. He was a relic of the past, a living ghost who seemed to belong more to the stories of Hollow Creek than to the present day. He kept to himself, never spoke, and always seemed to be watching, even with his back turned. It was as if he knew something we didn't, something about the curse of Whispering Pines that kept him tethered to that old house. The mystery of Old Man Hemlock and the curse of Whispering Pines was a story that would continue to haunt Hollow Creek for generations to come. Mr. Hemlock's yard was a jungle of overgrown weeds and twisted trees, a wild, untamed patch of land that seemed to defy the orderliness of our suburban lives. The branches of the trees twisted and turned, creating eerie shapes that danced in the moonlight, casting long, sinister shadows across the ground. It was a stark contrast to our meticulously manicured lawns, where every blade of grass was in its place, and every flower bloomed in perfect harmony. Our neighborhood prided itself on its pristine appearance, but Mr. Hemlock's yard was a dark blot on our otherwise perfect landscape. Rumors swirled around him like the leaves in his yard, carried on the whispers of the wind. The stories were as wild and tangled as the vegetation that surrounded his home. Some said he was a recluse, hiding from a dark past. Others believed he was a sorcerer, dabbling in forbidden arts. Some swore he practiced dark magic, that he could summon spirits and bend them to his will. They spoke of strange lights and eerie sounds emanating from his house in the dead of night, of shadows that moved on their own accord. Others claimed he was a vampire, which was ridiculous considering he was out in broad daylight more often than us teenagers. Yet, the stories persisted, growing more elaborate with each retelling. They said he had lived for centuries, feeding on the lifeblood of the innocent to sustain his unnatural existence. One stifling summer afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. The air was thick with heat, and the cicadas droned on incessantly, their song a constant backdrop to the lazy day. I had heard the stories all my life, but I'd never seen anything to substantiate them. I was mowing the lawn, the sun beating down on my back when I saw him. The rhythmic hum of the mower was almost hypnotic, lulling me into a trance-like state. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. A figure, tall and gaunt, emerged from the shadows of Mr. Hemlock's porch. He seemed to materialize out of thin air, stepping into the harsh light of the afternoon sun. His presence was almost otherworldly, as if he didn't quite belong in our world. He moved with an unsettling fluidity, like smoke given form. His movements were smooth and deliberate, each step calculated and precise. It was as if he was gliding rather than walking, his feet barely touching the ground. He paused at the edge of the yard, his face obscured by the wide brim of his hat. The hat cast a deep shadow over his features, hiding his eyes and giving him an air of mystery. He stood there, motionless, as if waiting for something. For a moment, our eyes met. Or at least I thought they did. It was hard to tell with the shadow covering his face. But I felt a connection, a brief, intense moment of understanding that sent a shiver down my spine. I felt a chill despite the heat, a prickling sensation that whispered, "Don't look." It was as if an invisible hand had reached out and touched me, a cold, clammy grip that tightened around my heart. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was drawn to him, compelled to understand the enigma that was Mr. Hemlock. I tore my gaze away, my heart pounding in my chest. When I looked back, he was gone, vanished into thin air, or maybe he'd just slipped back inside. It was hard to tell with all the shadows in that yard. I told my friends about it, of course, embellishing the story with every retelling. The Shadow Man of Hemlock Lane, we started calling him. My story became a local legend, fueling the flames of fear and fascination that already surrounded Whispering Pines. Part of me knew it was stupid, feeding into the rumors. But there was something about Mr. Hemlock, something in the way he moved, the way he seemed to watch, that sent shivers down my spine. One humid Friday night, we were huddled around a flickering bonfire in my backyard, swapping spooky stories. The night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The air was thick with the smell of burning wood and nervous anticipation. "I dare you, Mark," always the instigator, pointed a twig at me, his eyes gleaming with mischief and challenge. His face illuminated by the firelight, casting long shadows that danced around us, to go knock on Old Man Hemlock's door. The mere mention of his name sent shivers down my spine. The dare hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Everyone fell silent, waiting for my reaction. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears. I knew it was a bad idea, a really bad idea, but the pressure was mounting. The eyes of my friends bore into me, silently urging me to accept the challenge. Refusing a dare was social suicide at 16. Besides, the stories about Old Man Hemlock were just that, stories. Or so I tried to convince myself. A small part of me, the part that thrived on the thrill of fear, wanted to prove the rumors wrong, to show everyone that I wasn't afraid. I wanted to see for myself if the Shadow Man was real. The legend of the Shadow Man had been passed down through generations, each telling more terrifying than the last. They said he roamed the neighborhood at night, a dark figure lurking in the shadows, waiting to snatch unsuspecting victims. The thought of encountering him sent a chill down my spine, but it also ignited a spark of curiosity. What if the stories were true? What if I could be the one to uncover the truth? The weight of the dare pressed down on me, and I knew there was no backing out now. With a deep breath, I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and took the first step towards Old Man Hemlock's house. With a deep breath and a knot in my stomach, I accepted. My friends cheered, their excitement fueling my own apprehension. We crept down the street, our laughter swallowed by the oppressive silence of the night. The Hemlock house loomed before us, a grotesque silhouette against the moonlit sky. The air grew heavy, as if a cold hand had gripped my chest. The rusty gate groaned as I pushed it open, the sound echoing in the stillness. We tiptoed up the overgrown path, each step sending a jolt of fear through me. The porch steps creaked under my weight as I approached the front door. My hand trembled as I raised my fist to knock. Before I could gather the courage to knock, the door swung open with a groan. We all jumped back, startled by the sudden movement. The entryway was dark, the only light coming from the moon behind us. I strained my eyes, trying to make out the figure silhouetted in the doorway. "Trick or treat," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. A low chuckle echoed from the darkness. It wasn't the sound I was expecting, it was deeper, more human than the guttural growl I had imagined. Then a pair of eyes materialized in the darkness, 2 points of light that seemed to burn into my soul. Terror seized me. I didn't wait to see anything else. I spun on my heel and ran, my friends hot on my heels. We didn't stop running until we were safely back in my backyard, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding in our chests. We didn't speak for a long moment, the only sound the chirping of crickets and our ragged breathing. Then, Mark broke the silence, his voice shaky. "Did you see his eyes?" I nodded, unable to speak, the image of those glowing eyes seared into my mind. We huddled together, sharing nervous glances, the weight of our experience pressing down on us.